Hello, everyone. My name is Steven, and this is my wife, Leigh. And we are here at the Unlocking Love Summit, and we have with us today Linda Bloom. Linda Bloom is a psychotherapist and marriage counselor who teaches relationship workshops. She and her husband, Charlie Bloom, are co-authors of the widely acclaimed book, 101 Things I Wish I Knew When I Got Married, Simple Lessons to Make Love Last, which has sold over 100,000 copies, and Secrets of Great Marriages, Real Truths from Real Couples About Lasting Love, Happily Ever After, and 39 Other Myths About Love, That Which Doesn't Kill Us, How One Couple Became Stronger at the Broken Places, and An End to Arguing, 101 Valuable Lessons for All Relationships. She offers educational and counseling services to individuals, couples, and organizations. She is a regular presenter at Esalen Institute and Kripalu Yoga Center. She lives and practices in wonderful, beautiful Santa Cruz, California. And we are so excited to have you here, Linda. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm delighted that you invited me.
Linda, I'm excited to jump right in. So I'd like to start by asking you about the hidden gifts of the shadow. I'd love to just touch on what is the shadow and why would couples going through the aftermath of infidelity need to know what that is? What is its role in the way that couples interact?
The shadow, and thank you for asking, is the part that we don't like to believe that we are, that we want to keep in the dark and keep it hidden, and the little petty, selfish, cold, grabby, greedy parts of ourselves. And everybody has one. It's a normal part of life to be socialized, and you're taught in your family, we do it this way, the Smiths do it this way, and this is not acceptable. So as children, when we grow up, we reject parts of ourselves. Sometimes really beautiful parts of ourselves, but we learn that they're unacceptable. When you have a trauma in your life, it rips the cover off. Do you know, like infidelity will do it. Sometimes people have a serious illness or an accident. They get downsized out of their job, financial problems. This will rip the cover off. As painful as it is, it's good news because if we take it as an opportunity, AFGO, another friggin' growth opportunity, take it on as an opportunity, we can own parts of ourselves that we've rejected long ago and stuffed it in the unconscious. And so it really is a big chance for us to befriend some parts of ourselves, both the dark and the golden. Because while we were busy putting some parts of ourselves away, it wasn't all the things that we were embarrassed to show the world. They were things that we doubted that we even were strong in those ways, like our creativity, like, do you know, our integrity, like our ambition. Sometimes people put that in their shadow bag. So this is an opportunity to get to know parts of ourselves and to really integrate them back into our personality.
Oh, beautiful. Well, that really flips the whole victim narrative on its head, doesn't it?
Yes, if we can get out of the victim mentality, we take a big leap forward in our growth in consciousness. Because the victim's down at the bottom of the charts, doesn't feel very powerful, doesn't feel like they can cause their life goals, feel like they're at the mercy of other people and their desire system. And when we're in that mindset, we don't feel very powerful. When we start to own the disowned parts of the self, we are more of a whole human being and we start to feel powerful, influential. I'm not defined by my past. If we had a difficult childhood, we do not have to be defined by our childhood. If we've had difficulty in our adult life, like a betrayal, broken agreement, broken trust, we do not feel that we are just at the mercy of this awful thing that happened Do you know, we can start to look and see maybe I had something to do with that. Not that both people are equally responsible when there's an infidelity, but it is useful to see, even if it's a small part that we played, of how we may have put the context in that gave rise to that to happen. Then we can feel like, well, I can change that part. I have the personal power to change the part that I played in it. I can't control the other person, but I certainly can hold up my end. And the relationship can be stronger than it ever was before because of the damage that was done. It's so painful, it requires so much time and attention to rebuild the trust. It can be even better than it was before. We both can be wiser, more mature than we were before because we learned the hard way.
And I love that because, it's I think so many people go about their relationships, their marriages so like unintentionally. And something as serious as and life altering and life shattering as infidelity gives you this opportunity to start being more intentional about your relationship, more intentional about your behaviors, and looking at those parts of yourselves and being honest about that and being transparent with one another about those parts. And you know, I know you've written a ton of books on how to have an extraordinary relationship. And I just want to hear it from you. What are some of the habits that you see in exemplary couples?
Well, they're super communicators. So they start with telling themselves the truth, living very mindfully, and have an intimate relationship with themselves. So they know what they're feeling and what they're needing and what lights them up and what turns them off. And then they grow the courage to be able to relate to their partner with that level of openness and mindfulness and awareness. And I would say that that's a leading characteristic. One of the other things that we found when we interviewed all these blue ribbon couples from Secrets of Great Relationships, not only are they awake and aware and good communicators, but they're willing to get very vulnerable. They don't hide behind an image. So these shatter characteristics we were just talking about a minute ago, they talk about their insecurities. You know, they talk about their lusty fantasies when they're attracted to other people and they don't hide it from themselves or they don't hide it from their partner. And it kind of takes, some of the charge off of it when you just admit, you know, ooh, oh, it's attracted to that body over there. I'm not going to act on it, but I'm just admitting to you that there's something compelling about that person. And, when we can be more honest, we really have a huge advantage. Another characteristic is they're responsible. They're very careful that when they make agreements, they keep them. So, monogamy is not for everybody. And I respect people who make the choice to live a polyamorous lifestyle. That certainly has its place. We tried it. We couldn't do it. I'm too possessive. It was requiring way too much sharing that I'm not up for. But some people can do it. But if you make the agreement to keep fidelity, no kidding, you got to keep your agreement. And if you don't, and often people don't, you got to become a champion of repair. And all of these exemplary couples were really strong in repair. They were willing to apologize, admit they had done wrong. They were willing to forgive. They wouldn't hold a grudge. Sometimes takes a while. They were willing to be patient and committed to the process, no matter how long it took. And they were very highly responsible and committed to using all the crap of their relationship, no matter where it came from, infidelity and other places, as an opportunity to bloom out of. And so that was a real signature strength of these couples that we found were in the highest realms of happy couplehood.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, that sounds wonderful. Well, I guess what comes up for me is like, why doesn't everybody just do that?
That's a great question. And I'm very ambitious for my clients and my students and my readership. And I think that people don't have the kind of self-worth that they think that they're entitled to have a fabulous relationship. So one of the pieces of work that I have to do with my clients and my students is to stimulate their visionary.
Mhm.
Why do you think that exemplary relationships for other people and you can't have one?
Mhm.
Why don't you just let your imagination be big? And maybe you have to go back some years to when you were a teenager or a young adult, when you first got married, when you first moved in together. What were you dreaming of back then? Because people don't usually get married and say, oh, if it doesn't last, I'll go find somebody else. They've got a big vision then. And then they start trimming it down, thinking that their expectations were too wildly, impossible. And I say, what was that vision? Tell me your vision. Maybe we can revive that vision and reach high. And it's okay to have huge expectations as long as you have an intention to match. You don't expect your partner to bring it to you on a tray. You work with them, you get in there, you roll up your sleeves, you do the work, you get the communication skills, you get the conflict management skills, you get the negotiation skills, you get the repair skills, and you grow the qualities you know, those qualities, and you become eligible for a great relationship.
Yeah, I mean, and we're just not trained when we enter into a marriage or a committed relationship that it is a skill building exercise, right? We're just not, it's like, oh, if there's love there, you're good. But like you said, the shadow doesn't care about if you love this person or not. The shadow doesn't care if you have, it's going to come up, right? You're going to need to build those skills to work within yourself and then the communication with another person. What are the ways that you like to deal with these parts within people? You mentioned like the younger parts, and then at the age when you got married. Where do you like to go with clients?
Well, I sometimes tease a little bit. Do poke a little fun about how limited we can be, how romantic we can be, that we love each other. It's all just gonna flow, and that to learn to negotiate. No, we don't want to learn to negotiate. That's for the business sector. That's
Yeah.
not for
Mhm.
my romantic partnership. But people are usually too good at the beginning of their relationship negotiating for their needs
Mhm.
and to do it not in a business way of I'm not going to give you two unless you give me two. No, that the romantic way of negotiating is I want to give you everything I possibly can to help you to manifest your life goals. I want to be a support to you. I want to be believing eyes, do you know? And I want that to be done in a reciprocal way. I want to make a deal with you that we're in this together. We're going to support each other to bring out the best in each other. I want you to thrive because I realize it's going to come back on me. If I have a happy wife, I'm going to have a happy life. Do you know? And this is enlightened self-interest. I'm going to get the most happiness and well-being and health and longevity out of my life from my closest relationships. And certainly the person that I live with and that I sleep with, that I'm with all day, that I reality test with, we are going to really influence each other to have health and longevity and well-being. And so why don't we use what this relationship tosses up to really grow ourselves as individuals by growing our relationship.
Yeah. So you mentioned something that stood out to me, reality test that you reality test with. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes, we're
Yeah.
very influenced by who we are around.
Yeah.
There's all this data coming out now about if you have friends who are overweight, you're more apt to be overweight.
Mm.
And if you have friends who eat healthy food, nutritious food, that you're more likely to be eating a nutritious diet too. And if you hang around people who are physically fit and go to the gym and they walk and they climb and they, mountain bike and surf, these kinds of activities really influence us. It's a lot on an unconscious basis. So if you hang around couples who have ho-hum relationships, or have lots of resentment and incompletions and don't deal with them, their influence, we're reality testing with people who have set their sights low.
Mm.
One of the reasons my husband and I sought out all of these exemplary couples to interview them to tell us their secrets of success is we wanted to know what are you guys doing? Are you doing what we're doing? Are you doing things that we're not doing? We want to do those things too. One of the couples that we interviewed told us that they have a little ritual when one of them's been out at work or out doing errands or taking John to soccer, and they come home, they yell, "Honey, I'm home." And the person who's home yells, "Hooray!" And I thought that was so sweet that we instituted that. Just for the pick me up, that when you're around people who are really digging on each other, who have meaningful conversations, who learn from each other, who are on the growth path, we're influenced by those people, but they're in the minority. You have to find them. So we're reality testing with people who have set their sights low. So we kind of unconsciously set our sights low too. So as long as we're not throwing things and completely nasty and mean-spirited with each other and the relationship's kind of hobbling along, we'll just accept that. And I say, hell no, there's so much more available. While you're at it, why don't you go for the gold?
I, and I think that's one of these great opportunities that the pain of infidelity provides is you're kind of forced to reevaluate. You're forced to take a look at how do I actually want to live? How do I want to show up in this relationship? What do I like the vision piece you were talking about? What do I really want to become? What do I want to work towards? And prior to infidelity, I know at least for us, it wasn't really necessary. We weren't pushed. We weren't forced to look at those things to really elevate our relationship, elevate our communication, our intention, our vision. We were just kind of rolling right along, and then when this bomb goes off, now we're sort of shoved to the front of the line. We have to look at that stuff if we're even going to get through the infidelity and the recovery from the betrayal. But then it also has this effect of like elevating our communication, our relationship. And like you said, the kind of people that we're around and we're inspired by and being more, like, as you had mentioned, intentional about that.
Yeah.
Is that what you found with clients who have gone through that level of pain, whether it's betrayal or like you were saying, an illness or something that really jars your priorities, I guess you could call it.
Absolutely. Their life as they knew it before got shattered, and the pieces were laying all over the floor. And there were moments where they thought, I don't know if I want to do the work of picking these pieces up. Maybe I'll just cut my losses and start over with somebody else. But if they decided there was enough good about the relationship to preserve that and do a rebuild, then you start picking up the pieces. Not that you don't have some doubts along the way. You think, I don't know, this is hard. It's taking longer than I thought. And you get angry again and you feel victimy again. And then you have to put the corrections in again and do the forgiveness again, the
Mm.
apology again. And it's a long process. And we found with
Mm.
all of these exemplary couples, none of them locked in to that fabulous relationship. They earned their way in. They all had crises of some kind. And maybe it wasn't just the relationship. Most of them, it was the relationship. One couple had tremendous compatibility. They didn't fight with each other. They were rare birds, but they had a child who had cancer. She survived it, but it really brought them down to their knees. But we had numerous couples who were in the blue ribbon range. They were the highest functioning couples we could find who had infidelity in their past, and they used it. We also had a couple who invested all of their life savings in a business that went bust. They lost all of their money and they were homeless. They had to move in with friends with their kids and their dog because they couldn't even afford their apartment anymore. They brought themselves down to their knees, but they didn't blame each other for very long. They picked themselves up and got responsible and said, okay, how are we going to deal with this? Big learning experience. And, we had other people who had health crises and it brought them to their knees. A life-threatening illness will do that. But they chose to work it. Whatever was being flushed up, they tried to keep their seat. The Buddhists say when you meditate, you don't get flung off of your seat. You keep your seat, you breathe, you notice what you're feeling, you make room for it. You learn how to language what it is you're experiencing so that the other person can understand. Maybe they won't understand completely. It'll only be approximate, but it'll be enough. You don't have to agree about things, but you do need to understand each other's point of view.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about that. Well, first of all, I just felt like we did like a quick little meditation there. I was like, I was right along with you on that. But our son was diagnosed with autism when he was 2. And in my mind, that was kind of our crisis, right? And that was going to be what brought us together. But it ended up not being that. It ended up being infidelity years later. And it was like, it took what it took for us to have everything shattered so that we were kind of forced to rebuild. And that was a shock to me. I didn't think that we needed to sign up for more, that we needed more motivation to come to that place. But we did. And it's been a really amazing learning experience for me when you were saying how to create space for myself with what I'm feeling and be with my experience. It really took this infidelity and the betrayal for me to get to that place where I learned how to do that for myself. And it's helped with everything, even around parenting, an autistic child, around, parenting in general, having 3 kids and all the rest of it. So it's really helped me in a lot of different areas, learning those skills that you were just talking about, being present with myself. What am I feeling? Can I make space for it? So I really love how you explain that.
And I love that you brought to this event that you sometimes don't just get one that brings you down to your knees. You sometimes get more than one. And certainly my husband and I have had more than one. We had the infidelity one, we had the addiction one, and we're both cancer survivors. And there are multiples. So each time there's a crisis, not to let the crisis go to waste. You use what life hands you. And sometimes couples just have one big one, but often there are multiples, and we just don't know what life has in store for us, when it's going to happen, what it's going to be like, how big it's going to be. But when those pieces are all laying all over the place, we have a way to reassemble them in a different way. There was a little story that came my way just when I needed it, when we were dealing, this was way long ago, decades ago, but infidelity was we were young and dumb and didn't realize how shattered we were going to be by it. And I had a tendency, particularly back then, to be quite perfectionistic, Do you know, black and white thinking, good and bad, right and wrong, when I was much younger. I've come a long ways. And the story is about a king that had a whole storehouse full of gifts and possessions, but there was one thing that was precious to him above all the others. It was a big diamond, and he loved it. And somehow, don't know how, it sustained a big scratch down the middle. And he was so upset about it. And he called in the lapidaries from the kingdom, and they tried to buff it out, file it down, and it was too deep, and they couldn't. And finally, he heard that there was a lapidary at the far edges of the kingdom. He said, go get that guy to come here and see what he can do. And the lapidary looked at the gouge on the diamond, and he nodded his head, and he took out his special tools, and he etched a rosebud and used the gouge as a stem. And then there were these beautiful, elegant leaves, do you know? And the king was pleased. And to me, I held on to that image of the deep gouge on my precious diamond of my perfect relationship that wasn't perfect anymore. And I didn't know if it ever going to be repaired. And that with time and effort and skill, it could be made into a thing of beauty, perhaps even more beautiful than it was in the original.
Yeah.
Sweet story, isn't it a sweet story?
Uh, I was just completely captivated, and I'm trying to come back from that right now. But I mean, yeah, it is an absolutely wonderful story, you know, and I want to hear it again.
We can listen to the
We'll
recording.
listen to the recording so we can hear it again. You know, it's always interesting to me because, you know, sometimes when we talk about this type of stuff, it sounds so simple. Like, why don't you just go do it? Like, why don't you just go start living differently? Like, why don't you start doing and being, why don't you start implementing the habits of an exemplary person, of an exemplary couple, you know? Like, just go out and do it. And I know you had talked earlier about self-worth being a big factor in that, you know? What are some of the other like biggest roadblocks you think that are preventing people from not only starting to move in that direction, but from people who are wanting and really needing to heal? Like, what are the roadblocks there?
It isn't just self-worth, that's only one of the multiple factors. Another I already mentioned is about not being with people who are on a growth path. So people have just settled for so much less than is available. But there's another factor that I think is huge, that people have invisible loyalties to their family of origin. And it's mostly unconscious, but we tend to do the way our family did. In my family of origin, there's infidelity going back as far as I know, back to the old country. Do you know? So that was a pattern that was in the family. And there's a way in which we have to be guilty of the sin about doing our family of origin. We're going to do it better than them. And we have to reframe and rewire it that it's not a betrayal to what we were taught by our family of origin, that in a way it redeems them from what they suffered through and their development that was arrested, that they lived in a time where it wasn't available. Therapy workshops, personal growth, opportunities weren't available to them. Maybe they stayed in a marriage that didn't really work for them because the church would judge them too heavily, their community would judge them too heavily. So they lived with you made your bed, you have to sleep in it. And they didn't think that they could get out of that rotten trap that they were living in. And we need to see that there are opportunities available for us that our families did not have, and that it is not being disloyal to them. They really, in their deepest heart of hearts, wanted the best for us. They gave us the best that they had, but they were limited because they didn't learn any better from their families. So, really, it is honoring them when we do things in a more high integrity way, in a richer way, in a fuller way. And they may not really understand, but it's important for us to be self-referential and disengage from their approval or disapproval and know what's right for us and live out of those values.
Is that what you would say in your experience with infidelity? Would you say that that was one of the biggest, the limiting beliefs for you?
Well, my mother actually told me straight up, all men fuck around. She told me that. She thought she was helping me. Don't have this romantic illusion that you're going to have a man that's going to be faithful to you. She thought she was preparing me for the tough world. I actually believed her for a while, and I know that she meant well. But to to accept that as a given, just because she accepted that as a given, that that was her painful lot in life as a woman, and because my grandma, her her mom, accepted that as a given in her life, I didn't have to live by that family code. That's not working for me. Yeah. And
Yeah.
we can change our value system from the one that was handed to us. And we're better off if we do. We pick and choose. They gave us some good things. My family taught me some wonderful things to value education, do you know? To be good work ethic, be responsible and committed, do you know? But accepting living with pain, accepting living with dishonesty, deceit, cover up, incompletions, just live in that cess. No, I'm I am 21st century woman. I have opportunities, I have education, I have degrees, I can make my own money, unlike my grandma and my mom who didn't have the opportunities that I have. I do not have to live with that.
No, that's great. And yeah, I mean, I think so much does come back to that family of origin and what we're just conditioned to believe about life and like that we just believe to be true. And then you kind of hold a magnifying glass up to it and you're like, why do I believe this? You know, but you believe it so truly and so wholeheartedly, and then you put it under examination and you're like, this isn't right. You know? So I love that you bring that up and doing the family of origin work and taking a look at where that comes from and putting it under the magnifying glass and like, is this true? Is this what I want to move forward in my life believing? You know?
You get a lot of mileage out of telling the truth about your family of origin and what they gifted you with and what they didn't gift you with, and the gaping holes that are left that you need to fill in otherwise. But it is not all from our family of origin. Some of it is just from the culture in general, because we do not live in an intimacy honoring culture. We live in a kind of a sick culture that is highly materialistic and competitive. And sometimes people say, oh, I don't believe that money buys happiness, but they're not really living that way. When they're working so hard, do you know, and they want to have the newer car and the nicer home and the yard and the vacations and so forth, that they're putting a lot of their precious life energy into their career building and to making money rather than living more simply and having time for family and self and the couplehood, which the research is so clear about this. That's where you get the biggest bang for your buck, is in your closest relationships, particularly your committed partnership and marriage. Do you know, that's where people are getting their real happiness and well-being. That's where they're getting less hospitalizations, less cancer, less heart disease, shorter hospitalizations, less medication, and more vital years. So if we were thinking straight and really knew what was going to bring us a high quality of life, physically and mentally and emotionally, we wouldn't be putting so much time and effort into career. We would make sure to keep family in really good condition, and particularly the marital relationship in top-notch condition, and not have any room for incompletions that might veer us off the road. Do you
Yeah.
know? We stay right down the middle of the road. If we
Mhm.
start to put it on cruise control, we poke each other awake but fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're so right. I mean, that's not the messages that we get on social media. That's not the message that we're seeing, we're being inundated with by this particular culture. It's the opposite. It's like, no, your happiness is going to be over here in the shiny new car, and it's going to be over here in, this vacation, whatever it is. And there's very little emphasis on, yeah, what you're saying, cultivating that actual asset that is really going to pay off, right? That's really going to provide that level of wholeness, happiness, completion, health that you actually want. But we're sort of trained out of that, like disregard that asset and do everything else, to make yourself happy. And then something happens and you're forced to look at, is that, like you were saying, is that true? Is that really true? So I love that you brought that up. That's so true for us and our experience.
Yeah.
And easy to get distracted by that stuff.
In every class that I teach, when I teach at Esalen or Kripalu, wherever I teach, I make a big deal out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I challenge the students in the class. How do you define success? Do you define the success of your life the way the general public does, with money, power, status, and influence? Or have you come to the place where you're awake enough to know that your success in life is the depth and the breadth of the closeness of the relationships that you enjoy in your life? And that's a pretty confrontive look that people have to take. And I say, I don't expect you to just answer this question right this minute. Sometimes I just put these questions out for you. Go live in it for a while.
Yeah. And I love that too, because even just that question of like, what do you believe success is? And like, if you had asked me that, a few years ago, I would have told you that I would have told you, oh, it's about family, it's about this, about that, but it's like, look at my actions. Like, look at what I was actually doing. I love that you said that. Like, go out into the world and pay attention to yourself and see like what you actually think success is, not just what your head is telling you success is right now while you're trying to answer a question that has been asked of you. Like, look at what you're doing. Look at how you're living your life. Like, what are you being driven to? What is your actual like valued idea of success that you're striving towards right now in life?
And are you living it?
Are you living it?
Arrived at a belief system that is your own, and are you living it?
Yeah.
And I feel that I can confront people about that because I've been living it for years. And I feel that my life is a success because I have co-created with my husband a great relationship. We don't keep anything from each other. Neither one of us has any willingness to let things lay around incomplete the way we did when we were in our early part of our relationship. We don't fight anymore. And we're a couple of recovered hotheads because we used to fight a lot, power struggle and nasty and manipulative, and we weren't skilled. Um, and and I was a bitch on wheels years ago, and he was a master manipulator, and we were terrible. But we learned, a signature strength for both of us is we were both really lifelong learners, and we're good students. So we learned, and we learned from some really fabulously evolved people. And we learned that you better line up your integrity and have what you think and feel and say and do be as one. And you better learn how to negotiate your differences so that, you respect the differences and learn from the differences and learn to negotiate so we both get our needs met, not 100% of the time, but enough of the time that we're thriving. And we feel, both Charlie, he would say this if to you if you're here, we feel so blessed that we have work that we love that really has heart and meaning, and that we get to do it together.
Yeah.
We get to teach together, we get to write together, and we have work that we do separately as well. But that to me is hitting the big time. I feel like I really hit the jackpot, that not only do I get to do work that has a lot of meaning for me, but I get to do it with him.
So beautiful. Linda, is there anything else on your heart that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, because I think there's so much shame about talking about infidelity. I'm grateful to you two for lifting, that veil off. For the longest time, I wouldn't admit. I'm pretty open when I teach about most things, and I use my experience, but for a long time I wouldn't talk about that because it was embarrassing and I was afraid that people would judge me. And some people would, some people do. But I feel comfortable enough now that it was long enough ago and I've learned enough that I think that those of us who have learned a great deal from it need to be that beacon of light for the people who, there are a lot of people still around who believe once a cheater, always a cheater. Do you know that's wrong? That's not necessarily true. And it's a lot of work, but it is doable. So that was the closing remark that I wanted to make. If you have this in your life, use it. Don't just submit to living with this black mark. Be like the lapidary that makes it into something of beauty.
Well, thank you so much, Linda. I mean, that's absolutely wonderful, and it has been such a pleasure to speak with you today. And I do want to just take a quick moment to just thank our audience for watching, and let you know that Linda is also offering a few free gifts today. She's offering up her ebook titled "The 10 Biggest Things We've Learned Since Getting Married," as well as her ebook titled "Your Guide to Great Sex," and her ebook titled "Going for Gold." Thank you so much for that. I will hope that everybody takes a look at that. Um, all that information for the free gifts is provided in the links below, along with information on how you can get in touch with Linda and find out more about the work that she's doing. So I hope everyone takes a look. Again, Linda, I just want to thank you so much for being here today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.